If you can stomach the satire and the Python humor, it's a must watch. It's very, very funny and quite crass. But the thing that stuck out to me as I was watching was how Brian doesn't want to be followed. You'd think that, a normal person might, quite enjoy or take advantage of the fame that they accrue. But Brian doesn't want to be followed. He hates it. But as his notoriety grows, Brian continues to accrue this huge following of people. And they all profess him to be the Messiah. And the whole time he screams back at them that he's not the Messiah. And the tension peaks with the famous line from Brian's mother that he's not the Messiah, he's a very naughty boy. Now, Python obviously takes inspiration from the gospel story for their movie. And in our passage today, we see that Jesus gains a huge following. And in our passage, I can see that there are two similarities and one major difference between the gospel and the life of Brian, which struck me. But before I continue, let's pray and we'll reread the passage. Father, thank you for your word. Open our eyes to see what you have to say, our ears to hear, and our hearts that we would change. Amen. And so Jesus withdrew with the disciples to a lake, and a large crowd from Galilee followed. When they heard about all he was doing, many people came to him from Judea, Jerusalem, and Idumea, and the other regions all across the Jordan and all around Tyre and Sidon. Because of the crowd, he told the disciples to have a small boat ready for him to keep the people from crowding him, for he had healed many, so that those with diseases were pushing forward to touch him. And whenever the impure spirits saw him, they fell down before him and cried out, "You are the Son of God." But he gave them strict orders not to tell others about him. And so the first similarity I see between our passage and between the life of Brian Movie is the huge following that's accrued. People literally come from all over the nation and beyond to see Jesus. In fact, we read that so many people come, it's hazardous for Jesus to be near them. As they all wanted to touch him, they lurch forward together and he's in danger of being trampled. These people have walked and carried other people for hours just to be near Jesus, for days even. And Director Mark wants us to be amazed about how far these people have come. Some people have walked from Bondi. Other people have walked from Wollongong. Some people have come all the way from Newcastle, some even from Orange. Jesus is a big, big deal. Now, if we have a look at Brian's popularity isn't that great. He is swamped by people on a number of occasions, including one where they chase him into a hole. And this leads me to another peculiar similarity between both stories. And that is that the following is unwanted. Stay with me. Right? For Brian, he hates that people are following him. He just wants to live his life. Especially when things start going well for him, the crowd gets in between him and all the good things that he could have. And anything he says to try and turn them away is spun to make him seem like even more someone worth following. Now, for Jesus, the following isn't exactly unwanted. But why do you think the people are coming to him? Have a look again at the passage. Why are they coming to Jesus? Well, they're coming to be healed, aren't they? It's his healing powers which have made Jesus famous. And here at the beginning of Mark, this has seemed to solidify Jesus's fame. He is an extraordinary healer, but I'm not sure of what Jesus wants. Because remember back to chapter 1, verse 38, Jesus tells us why he came, and that was to preach. Jesus came to preach. The healing is secondary. It's only a proof to the teaching. And so if the people only know Jesus as healer, not the bringer of God's kingdom, then what good does the healing do them? In fact, the great irony of the passage is the only people who can really appreciate who Jesus is are the demons. And this brings me to the big difference for me, well, in particularly in this passage, between the life of Brian and Jesus. And that is, with Brian, his followers call him the Messiah. His followers actually attribute that title to him, and they treat him as God's Messiah. But in Mark's gospel, nobody calls Jesus Messiah. At least at this point, nobody calls Jesus Messiah. No, Jesus is just a healer. He's significant for me if there is something wrong with me. I can be made better, yeah. But once I'm healed, Jesus means nothing to me. And so the people don't know and they don't understand who Jesus is. They come to him out of selfish ambition, that is, to be healed. And then after, what happens? What do they do after they're healed? Well, they go home, right? The words are missing from this passage are the ones we hear in Acts, and a great number was added to them that day. Or many of them had faith in Jesus, or many of them began following Jesus. Mark doesn't say any of that. And so what does that lead us to believe? The people were healed, and then nothing happened. They head home. Or maybe they're like the leper from chapter 1, and they go off and they tell other people about, how great Jesus's healing powers are. But they don't stick around to hear the preaching. They don't stick around and learn about faith. They don't stick around to learn how to be right with God. They don't know Jesus as their Messiah. Now, for us today who are on Zoom, the Messiah is the one who gets you up on a Sunday morning, isn't he? What other reason do you have to be here on a Sunday morning when you could be in bed, enjoying your sleep in, with no responsibilities because of lockdown? It's the Messiah, isn't it? And this is awesome. This is fantastic and so encouraging for me to see you. And I hope you're encouraged by how many other people we have with us. We allow our Messiah to dominate our routines in lockdown, and we allow him to control how we spend this time we've been given. And that glorifies him. And so for us to have Jesus as our Messiah in lockdown, it means to let him control our routines, control how we spend our time. And through that, we glorify him. I take the extra time given to me in the mornings where I don't have to drive to work. I use that to read the Bible myself, with my family, or with another person who's in my singles bubble. I take the time out of my day to pray and honor God with my thoughts and think about how other people are going and pray for my city. Not just that we get out of lockdown, but that they would know him. Maybe you've bought a new book from Koorong to read. Maybe you've signed up for VBC because now you're free on Sundays. Maybe you've decided to use your evenings to attend an online course at Moore or SMBC and make yourself a more effective weapon for God's kingdom. We can take Jesus as our Messiah. Without being in contact with other people, it is hard to think of ways we might glorify God, but having our Messiah dominate our lockdown lives is one fantastic way to do that, to treat him as our Messiah, even when we can't go outside, be with God's people. But even then, there still might be some amongst us who Jesus is not our Messiah. Maybe church into lockdown. For some of us, Jesus remains a healer. We don't model our routines about him, or acknowledge him except for on Sunday mornings. And there is a severe warning for us because the people who Jesus healed, they only lived a couple more years. They still died. Jesus didn't heal them from their sin. Many of them will have suffered God's judgment. And same for us. Coming to church, having good habits doesn't take our sin away. Being healed doesn't take our sin away. If we died, Would we pay for our sin ourselves? Which, of course, you know, means going to hell for them. Is Jesus just a healer? Just a wise man? Maybe even just a stranger to you still? Even though you're here, perhaps every week. Is he just a healer? Even in lockdown and COVID, our sin means that we are God's enemies. And unless we have Jesus to reconcile us to God, there's no amount of social distancing, mask wearing, right, or isolation that can prevent sin. You need a vaccine. You need to have Jesus as your Messiah. And my second point from this section is, how did Jesus's fame grow? Well, people proclaimed him as a healer. You know, some people wouldn't have cared if people went around saying how amazing Jesus was at healing. But you know who listened? The sick listened. The demon-infested listened. And the lepers, they listened. They listened because they wanted to be healed. They listened because they know they needed help. Now, for us now, despite the climate that we're in, health isn't really our problem. No, it's mental health. Depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts, DV, it's all around us. It's in our neighbors' houses. It's across the street. It's in the houses of people who we think are doing fine. See, we live in a time where we're not all leprous. We don't all have demons, but lots of us are struggling with a need for something which Jesus provides. Every morning when people get up, and every time at 11 o'clock when Gladys Berejiklian steps up to her press conference, she holds the lives of people in her hands and on her words. Why? Because she has the power to give or take away hope. See, but for us, having Jesus as our Messiah is real hope. Hope beyond a lockdown, hope beyond a cure. Right? We are those whom Jesus has saved. We've been justified. We've been sanctified. We've been adopted as God's sons and daughters. And yes, you yourself may not be feeling so great about the situation in our city at the moment, but within us is an incredible hope, isn't it? The hope that even though lockdowns may increase and new variants would rise up, that I have been saved from my sin. That there is an inheritance waiting for me in eternity, that there is a room prepared for me in heaven, and that there is nothing that can separate me from the love of God. I have confidence. I have confidence that no lockdown can take away, that no disease can separate. And so for us, we ought to be people who spread it. We ought to be people who spread hope and joy. And so this week, what I'm going to be doing and what I would encourage you to do is to ring that non-Christian friend that you've been working on in the last couple of years and praying for, ring them and check in on them and ask, hey, can I read the Bible with you? Or is there something that I can pray for you? Right? Or if there's a family member that you've been working with as well, can I read the Bible with you? Is there anything I can pray for you? Or if you don't have non-Christian friends or don't have non-Christian family members, and power to you, check on your neighbors because they're in trouble as well. Talk over the fence, do it with a mask, do it through a window, through a door screen. Can I read the Bible with you? Is there anything I can pray for you? Because brothers and sisters, we have hope, don't we? We have hope. That's why you're here. If you didn't have hope in Jesus, then we're just wasting our time. But we do have hope. Thousands upon thousands of people came to Jesus because they need healing. And I tell you, brothers and sisters, if we have faith to spread the hope and joy that we have in Jesus, then millions of people, millions on millions, will come to Jesus to have that same hope and joy. Now, even as I'm reading these words, I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not going to be a hypocrite. I'm thinking, how can I ever do that? How can God ever use me to bring millions of people to know him? Well, the next section provides the answer for us. Let's have a read. Look down at verse 13. Jesus went up on a mountainside and called to him those he wanted, and they came to him. He appointed 12 that they might be with him and that he might send them out to preach and have authority to drive out demons. These are the 12 he appointed: Simon, whom he gave the name Peter; James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John. To them he gave the name Boanerges, which means the sons of thunder; Andrew, Philip, Bartholomew, Matthew, Thomas, James, son of Alphaeus, Thaddeus, Simon the Zealot, and Judas Iscariot, who betrayed him. So Jesus goes up onto a mountainside and he chooses his closest followers. He deliberately escapes from those who don't know him to choose those who will represent him. And we expect Jesus to pick extraordinary, impressive people to bring his message so that it's easier to listen to, so that it's easier to follow, right? Powerful individuals, strong men, dashing of stance and wit. But the men that Jesus picks are far from impressive. First, he appoints Simon Peter, a hick fisherman, uneducated, unsophisticated, lowly. There is no reason for me to listen to Peter. Strange choice. Let's continue. Then he picks James and John, who he calls the sons of thunder. Now, admittedly, when I first read this as a teenager, I thought that's a pretty cool nickname, isn't it? The sons of thunder. That's pretty rad. But it actually means, Jesus is almost slighting him, that they're people who are always willing to say things but not do things. In one sense, they're like a little yappy dog, always willing to be loud and noisy, but not actually able to physically impose themselves, right? And now these guys are a really odd choice for representatives because you want someone to act on your behalf. That's what a representative is, right? But rather, these guys are reluctant to act. It's bizarre. It's strange. Odd choices again. And if we see as we continue, Mark continues with the list, we get a literal list of ragtag individuals, randoms from Hicksville, Galilee, fishermen, tax collectors, tradespersons, and someone who's infamous for belonging to a terrorist sect. And then finally, director Mark, he foreshadows the end of the story as he introduces Judas, hanging the black cloud of destiny over his name. Now, there is nothing, absolutely nothing impressive about these men. They are nobodies. They are lowlifes and forgettables. But that's the point. Jesus's representatives aren't to be impressive. Far from it. It's the message which is impressive. It's the good news of the gospel which is impressive. It's easy to follow good-looking, impressive, successful people, and social media, one of the primary drives of that, or social media is that. But there is no reason to listen to these men but the message. On the outside, these men are worth nothing, but the message they bring is eternally priceless. And now, for those of us who are feeling like, that God can't work through me, or God, I'm not important enough for God to work through me. Well, it's the same for us. We are, in the grand scheme of things, we are unimportant. We are insignificant in the eyes of the world. But the hope and joy that we bring, that Jesus brings through us, is eternally priceless. These men weren't important, but Jesus makes them important. And you and I, we're not special, but Jesus makes us special. And that's what Paul says in 2 Corinthians 4:7, that we have this treasure, that is the gospel, in jars of clay. That is our unimportant exterior. But what's inside is beautiful, life-saving. Jesus explicitly chooses the weak and insignificant here to spread his life-changing message. He doesn't want his listeners to get caught up in the impressiveness of the speaker, but the message. And so it's okay that you and I don't feel powerful. It's okay that we don't feel like we are significant, that people should have a reason to listen to us. In fact, that's better, because Jesus chooses people like us to spread the message. And so when you contact your friends this week, or when you talk to your family, or even if you talk over the fence to your neighbor, you don't have to be powerful. You don't have to be impressive. You just have to be one person who's willing to say, look what Jesus has done for me. Look at the hope and joy that I have. Are you interested? Are you seeking this too? If we have faith enough to speak the gospel, we know that God will work miracles through us.